I think in the beginning of my business, I was not trusting myself and giving other people the final say. And then it was not feeling good. I mean, I joke that I turned in one boss I didn't love for like 20 bosses on the internet that were all telling me different things. And I was like, So, yeah, just remember you can use them as a resource, but you are the like boss of your business.
Welcome to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. We will explore the perks and also the behind-the-scenes challenges of figuring out what to share. I'm your host, Reme Mancera, a personal brand strategist who loves finding the story connectors that illustrate the benefits of what you offer. And by the way, you don't need a Hollywood style for that. In case you ever wonder, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling. Welcome to Who Cares About My Story. I am delighted to have you here, Deanna. Thank you for accepting this invitation. You are one of the most creative. I love what you do. So happy to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me.
So let's start by please telling us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Deanna Seymour. I'm a graphic designer and content coach, and I help people with making less content, but making it better. And usually in my world, by better, I mean more colorful, more authentic to their personalities, and more fun for them to create. So that's pretty much what I do. I do branding, static 9 grids, random design projects, and I also have a membership and one-on-one community called Content Playhouse to help people show up in ways that feel good for them.
Yeah, we will go deeper into the feeling good about what they do, what we do. Now, can you share a bit about your own story?
Yeah. So I started my career as a art teacher in the public school system, mostly high school, and then towards the end, a little bit of elementary school. But yeah, if I go back in time even more, I actually went to art school and I wanted to be a photographer. And then my parents were like, oh no, you're not going to be able to like make money being an artist. You should be an art teacher. And then I got all scared and I was like, okay. So majored in art education, minored in photography. And then the whole time I was a teacher, kept trying to start businesses because I really just feel like I have the drive to be an entrepreneur. Like I wanted to make my own hours. I wanted to do things my own way. I always want to be creating. So it just made sense. Like I just kept starting businesses and then getting busy with my full-time job. You know, as a teacher, I would have the summers off and I feel like almost every summer I have like a new idea for a business, and then it would ramp up and then I would get busy and kind of kept doing that cycle. Like my partner, Matt, and my friends are like, oh, here goes Deanna again, making another business. So when I was finally teaching at the end and knew that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a teacher anymore. And it was right around the time of the pandemic. And then we went virtual teaching and I was like, I do not want to go back. I was like, oh my gosh, I love starting businesses. Like, what if I helped people do all the things I love when I'm starting all these businesses? Like choosing the colors, choosing the logo, like making the logos, figuring out what it's going to be, all the ins and outs, and really getting people excited about this new thing I'm doing. So I thought, oh, I can just live vicariously through my clients and have the fun of like starting all these new businesses, but they just won't be my businesses. My business can stay the same and I can help all my clients. So that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what are the skills that I have? How do I use it in my own favor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what impact do you think sharing your story has had on your business?
Well, honestly, I don't know if I would have a business today if I didn't sort of give myself a timeout and start doing it like my own way or sharing my authentic self, because all my previous businesses were, I didn't really think of them necessarily as like businesses, right? They were like fun things that I loved making that I could potentially monetize. So I had a business called Missing Monsters where I would create custom monsters based on people's answers to this like little Mad Lib form and photograph them and send them to them. And it was really fun. And then people wanted them. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can make you some. I made them for my niece and nephew first. And then it just kind of happened. And then I taught like punk rock aerobics. And it was more from me loving doing jazzercise and then not or like failing my jazzercise audition. And honestly, I think being too punk, like I don't think that corporate jazzercise liked my look. And then I was like, well, I'm gonna start my own aerobics, and people wanted to come. And so I never really thought of those as like quote unquote businesses until I was like, okay, I'm gonna have an online business. And I sort of fell into this world of online business. And I was like, okay, I'm just a teacher. I don't know anything about starting a business. And then I started going down all the rabbit holes trying to learn what kind of branding do I need? Like, what are the rules? How do I, get people to sign up? How do I get clients? What kind of content do I need to make? And I was just like a Googling machine, Googling everything, buying courses, spending money I didn't really have. Luckily, my partner was very understanding, but I bought some expensive courses in the beginning that he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, it's going to change our lives. Spoiler alert, it did not change our lives. It just cost a lot of money. And I just remember one day I was leaving Target with my daughter, who was about 3 at the time. And we had just bought her this really cute mermaid bathing suit. And I was looking at the bathing suit and I was like, I came from, almost my whole life, either being an artist or an art teacher. And I was like, ugh. In my head, I was like, I wish that these could be my brand colors. And I remember driving home from that and I was like, why can't they be? Like, I didn't follow any rules on any of my other businesses. I had never once, even doing Etsy or doing whatever, I had never really Googled to say, like, how do I do this? Like, what's the correct way to do this? And maybe it was because I was treating them like side hustles and not like my job when I decided, oh, I'm going to quit teaching and this will be my job. It's serious now. I better get serious about it. But I went home that day and I pulled up the bathing suit on the Target website, brought it into Photoshop, used the eyedropper tool, and those are still my colors today, which for someone with ADHD, it's like going on almost 4 years, 3 or 4 years now. So I'm like, it's because I loved them. And there's a lot of them. So I've never had to like look for a different color. I have pretty much all the colors. I think like it's a rainbow of colors. It was a unicorn bathing suit. And honestly, I do kind of feel like the momentum shifted where I felt like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this. I can do stuff. Like I can make up whatever colors I want. I can make my website look like whatever I want. And I can just be myself. And honestly, I do really feel like that was a turning point. And I don't know if it was because all of a sudden people loved me or if just like my confidence level went up because I was like, I'm in charge. Like I am the boss of this business. And perhaps people saw that and were like, oh yeah, she could help me. When I was in that weird space of like, I don't even know how to write an email. Let me Google how to ask somebody if I can be on their podcast. Like all you do is email someone and say, hey, I love your podcast. Can I be on it? Like, I think we kind of overcomplicate everything in online business. And obviously there might be more to a good podcast pitch, but essentially you're meeting people and saying, hey, you have a cool podcast. Can I be on it? And yet we're just like frozen in fear of like, how do I do it? Or like, how do I take people's money? I had already taken people's money. To be honest, I don't want to age myself, but for the punk rock aerobics, people just like wrote down their credit card numbers in a notebook. I would go home and like put it into PayPal. So like we all know how to figure it out. It might not be the way that like a rich online business celebrity does it, but it would probably work for you. So anyways, I'm rambling, but yeah, that's kind of that moment with that bathing suit was definitely my, coming out of my cocoon, I guess, and being like, okay, I need to do this my own way.
Mm, I love the story. I think that this somehow like that moment of giving yourself permission to run your business on your way, on your terms, was like, okay, I can do this with the colors, but with everything. And from that point, it's like, okay, I don't need to ask Google. I don't need to find the formula because I believe that we are somehow used to all these messages that this is the right formula, that you will get so and so. And then it's like, okay, I don't have the formula. Maybe I need to look for that formula. Otherwise, it's my ruin. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and I also want to touch on something else that I think is important. So I was a teacher and my husband was a line cook. And when I started my business, we had 2 kids. Technically, I was pregnant with the one when I knew, okay, I don't like teaching. My husband got more paternity leave than I got maternity leave. And so at that point, I was just like, these people don't care about me as a teacher. Like, I just was not happy in my job. Loved my students. Everything else about that job was not my favorite. So yeah, when I basically wasn't getting any maternity leave, I was like, these people do not care about me. I gotta do my own thing. But it's teacher salary and a line cook salary. A kid, one kid and a kid on the way. So like my business needed to make money. And I think sometimes we can want to follow the rules because we're like, okay, this has to work, We buy the courses because I remember thinking, well, I'm talking to my husband, which that's like a whole other story, but I bought one of the courses. He was actually in the hospital having surgery because he has Crohn's disease, and the cart was closing, like the bonus, all the things, all the tricks. And I bought a $2,000 course without telling him. And when I was talking to him at the hospital, I was like, no, it's okay. Like, this is going to help me. This is going to be great for our family and all this stuff. Looking back on it, I'm like, they use like every trick in the book on me. But I just wanted to say, if anybody's listening and thinking, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or feeling bad, like I'm trying to do this. Sometimes you feel like you have to do that because it has to work, like you need the money. And also a lot of these people promise that it's going to be faster, easier, quicker. And that they sort of like know a secret that we don't know. So that's like a really real fear, not just like a scarcity mindset. It's like a real thing if you need to make money and you're feeling stressed out about that and want to look to people to learn. So I just wanted to say that. That's what I was feeling. But I was also feeling like my business wasn't working. And I think the reason it wasn't working is because I wasn't doing it my way. Like, I also remember thinking, people like me in real life. Like, not to sound like braggy, but, I was like, my coworkers think I'm funny. Like, I'm fun. People like me. And I'm struggling online. It just feels like everything I'm doing just doesn't feel natural. And it's not like, I'm like, where are the people? People like me in real life. Like, where are the people online that are going to like me? It wasn't me. It wasn't me showing up online. So they just didn't like that version of me that was like a collage of all the different formulas and downloads and courses. They weren't like digging that. When I stopped doing that and started writing my about page in my own voice about me with my colors, like slowly people started liking me. And I'm sure there's tons of people who come to my website and are like, oh my gosh, this looks like a unicorn threw up all over this page. Like a unicorn bathing suit exploded on this page. Who is this woman? I'm out of here. And that is totally fine with me because it really it connects with the people that it needs to connect with.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that you bring that because one of the goals of this podcast is also sharing the idea that there is different ways of running your business. There is not just one way of doing the right way of doing it. And every guest that I have talked to, each of you have a different path. The business is a different combination, and it's because each of you are a different person and a unique combination of your background, the lifestyle that you are looking for, what is your version of success. And
Mm-hmm.
all that is so important in deciding how you run your business. So if this podcast is also helping people to see that it's possible to run your business in your way, on your terms, and it's okay, you will figure it out. You can look for inspiration, you can try to learn from others. That's totally fine. But at the end, you are combining in your own bottle and putting out your own thing
Yeah.
based on
Yes.
you.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I sound like I hate online courses, or I think like, oh, don't do anything, or don't join an opt-in, like don't get any PDFs. That is definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying be careful while you're doing that, that you're not like giving up your own, I feel like the script was flipped. Like I was acting like they were in charge of my business and I was just doing what I was told. You can absolutely like learn things, take courses, download PDFs. Just remember that those act like you're hiring them. Like you are in
Yes.
charge and you can take and leave whatever you want. Because as a teacher, of course, I love learning new things, and we don't know what we don't know, and a lot of times I think what we really need to learn when we do a business is like the how-tos, like the technical. Like I always feel like I'm Googling when I'm in my website and I'm like, wait, and I forget every time because I don't do it all the time. I'm like, how do I make a pop-up come up again? Like, and I have to go watch a YouTube video and step by step, figure out how to put a pop-up in. But that's not like me, oh, I didn't do it my own way to put, like, there's just a specific way you have to put the pop-up in, and you just watch the video and you do that. But I'm talking about like overarching, like, how do you run your business? How do you show up in your business? Like, just remember that you get the final say. And I think in the beginning of my business, I was not trusting myself and giving other people the final say. And then it was not feeling good. I mean, I joke that I turned in one boss I didn't love for like 20 bosses on the internet that were all telling me different things. And I was like, so yeah, just remember you can use them as a resource, but you are the like boss of your business.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that you are a big example of bold branding and coherence. For example, in the decisions that you make about the content and how you are um, advising your audience to do less content and more meaningful, and how you are leading by example that. So how have you gone through that decisions, for example, about the new episode on your podcast and how you are focusing more on the networking pop-up parties, for example?
Hmm. How did I come to that? I mean, honestly, the other thing I think we forget is business is a lot of experimentation, right? And I'm also someone who just wants to try it. Like my business coach is always like, I know you're just going to do it anyways, so go try. Like she cannot, like now that I'm on a roll being my own boss, nobody can tell me what I can and can't do. So she's always like, well, give it a try. And I also think I've woven experimentation into my brand values, and I talk with my audience very openly about it. Like, I'm going to do this thing. And so, yeah, my podcast is always evolving. Um, and I think that's okay. Like when I started the podcast, I was like, I better have it all figured out because I can't change it. That is 100% not true. And at this point, I've just changed it. I made season 1 when I first started the podcast I have now, which is called Big Fun Content. When I first started that, it was called F That Breaking the Rules of Online Business. So if someone finds Big Fun Content and goes and listens to episode 1, the intro is going to be saying, welcome to F That Breaking the Rules of Online Business. But I think people are smart enough to realize like, oh, it must have been called something else, So I went back and just said season 1, F That Breaking the Rules of Online Business. Season 2, Big Fun Content. Season 3, who knows? I don't actually write season 3 yet, but I know it's going to come back because I already have this feeling of like, oh, I miss it. But when you're a solopreneur like me, I do have a VA who helps me some. But also I'm running a business that I'm like very aware of my numbers. And after spending lots of money on courses and like being not profitable in my business, I'm very mindful of my budget. And so I can't have my VA do everything. Sometimes people are just like, oh, outsource that, outsource that, outsource that. So I'm like, yeah, that would be nice, but I don't, then I won't have any money. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. So she was doing a lot of editing of the podcast, and I kind of thought about it and I was like, I don't know that the podcast is bringing me the amount of business. Like it's not driving. Now I sound all fancy, which is not me at all. I'm like, it's not driving revenue. I don't know. You know what I mean? I wasn't sure that me spending money on the podcast was equal or, worth it in terms of like what it was bringing. now that I haven't done it in a while, I sort of miss it. And I realized it was also bringing me people I was networking with, and it was fun for me. So I'm brainstorming ways to bring it back with less editing and like make it not as hard. And also still enjoying my summer with my kids' crazy schedule being off sometimes and summer camp sometimes. So like that's floating around somewhere. But what I was really excited about was, like you said, doing networking, more networking, which is also what I love about podcasting. But after a pop-up networking party, there's nothing to edit. There's nothing like it's not the same as a podcast. And I get to meet people, and it actually people sign up to do it. So people, in order to come, sign up for my email list. And to listen to my public podcast, nobody was giving me their email address. So in a way, I'm like, "Ooh, I think this might be a little more strategic and easier." My VA comes to the pop-up parties because that really helps me. But that's only 1 hour, and it took her longer to like edit an episode and make the graphics and do all, like it's always about just like I feel like you having your eyes on everything in your business, and then kind of pulling the levers as you feel like you have more time, or you maybe don't have as much time or energy, or you're like really excited about this, so you're going all in on this, and you're gonna not show up on Instagram as much because it's making you crazy right now. So like put that lever down, push this lever up, and just constantly kind of changing, because also the platforms are always changing, and like your life is changing. What's busy? This is a busy season. This is whatever. And giving yourself permission, I think, to switch it up. But there is one thing: my Thursday emails. I have not missed a Thursday email, I think, in over 2 years. So that is my real, like, that is the one thing. And honestly, that's the thing I love doing the most. So pick the thing you love doing the most, I would say. If you're trying to be consistent at something you hate, it's going to be super duper hard. Like, I would argue maybe even impossible for most humans. Like, that's me every time I'm like, I'm going to walk every day. And it's like, I don't do that every day because sometimes I don't want to. So, and maybe every day is too much for me. So maybe actually I'm having a light bulb moment. Maybe I should walk every Thursday and work on that for a while or something. But yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll just keep talking. But yeah, I think it just comes down to changing those levers and figuring out your perfect content for that season in your life.
Mm. Yeah. And something that you mentioned, I think it's really important, like checking what feels good and
Mm,
then going from there, because as you said, there are seasons where you feel more inspired to do one thing or to focus on more networking, or other season you are more into let's go inside, create content, or optimize my systems, or figure it out what makes more sense that I spend my time in. So I think that is also finding the balance, especially with each of our business models, because
yeah.
it's going to be different from a different business models. That is a solopreneur. I am also solopreneur, so it's a different story of someone with a team of 10 people working for them. So you cannot think of doing the same amount of content, even if you want to, and you feel like it's not possible, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and like you said too, I mean, I like the pop-up networking parties right now and podcasting. But if you're somebody who is more of like an introvert and is like, oh, that sounds exhausting. Even if someone says, oh my gosh, these pop-up networking parties have been working so well for me. They're growing my list. It's amazing. It's working so great. If that's not like in alignment with your personality, and every time one was coming up, you're like dreading it, and it's just like, oh, it's just not gonna work the same. It's not, and maybe technically, maybe you could match the signups, but your stress level, like it would be awful. Just like me, I mean, I like meeting people and talking to people. If somebody was like, all you should do is write really rich SEO blogs by yourself all day long in your office and don't talk to anyone and just focus on keywords and research, and I would be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I could probably do it in the beginning if I really had to, but I would dread it after a while. And I really do think that the blogs would suffer. And I think that the networking party would suffer if you were there like scared and nervous and hating it and sweating and being like, I can't wait till this is over. The people will pick up on that. And if I'm writing blogs being like, I hate writing these blogs, I have to do this every week. Ugh, it's the worst. It's not going to be a fun blog to read. That's just my
Mm.
opinion. That's what I think. I think it
Yeah.
seeps in. I think it seeps into the crevices of your content if you're not into it.
Yeah. And also why you will create a business for yourself for just doing things that you don't like. Like, what is the point?
Right? But like in the beginning, it's like hard not to because it's hard. It's hard to go to a meeting or a mastermind or a community meeting and you hear someone else saying,
Yeah.
my YouTube channel is growing. It's really hard not to say, oh, I should do a YouTube. Oh, she's having a YouTube channel success. Like I should also do a YouTube channel. Just like try to, I mean, I'm usually not like a hippie, like mindful, like grounding person, but I'm just like, just take some breaths and just like really try to stick to the thing that you like. And I'm not saying that like looking at the numbers doesn't matter ever, but I do think we tend to jump a lot, like way too quickly. We're like, oh,
Mm.
and also looking at like, there's someone in Content Playhouse who's had a YouTube channel grow really, really quickly, but she is living in France, teaching families with children to relocate to France. And it was sort of something that nobody else was talking about on YouTube. So she just kind of stumbled onto this weird, not weird, but you know what I mean? Like this empty hole in YouTube that nobody was talking about because people would talk about retiring in France and people were
Mm.
talking about being single with no kids or with their partner traveling and working, like being a nomad, digital nomad. But there was not very many people who were like, they have a middle school daughter. Like, could we do this with a family? And so they started making videos and it just went crazy. But that doesn't mean that if I start a YouTube channel, I can do what she did. Like, it's just talking
Yeah.
about branding or content. Like, that is not a hole on YouTube. There's plenty of other people talking about that on YouTube. So you have to also remember, okay, but their business isn't my business. And like you said, and their personality isn't my personality. And sometimes their
Yeah.
resources aren't my resource. Like if you can outsource all your YouTube videos to someone else and it's so easy for them to create every week,
Yeah.
but you're not going to do that, just try to like keep your blinders on a little bit and just stay focused on you and your things and like be proud of them and be happy with like the things that you're creating.
Yeah, and something, of course, we need to do some things that we don't like in business, and especially if you are at the beginning, you don't have a budget for doing all the stuff. Okay, yes, but what I meant was like that the main thing that you are focusing your time should not be something that you don't like. In my opinion, should be
Yeah.
something that lights you up, and you are looking forward to do that, and you find a way to make it fun because otherwise,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, and just closing what you said about, it's also about the patient. When we are jumping from one thing to another, it feels like we don't give the thing, it's not enough space to actually work because it's just we're jumping, jumping, jumping. There is no space to for the thing to actually grow or bloom.
Yeah, well, it would kind of be like, I just thought about this, but it would be like making dinner and like putting the water on the stove to boil to cook your noodles. And you're like, oh my gosh, never mind. The water's taking too long to boil. Let's make pizza. And then like you have to wait for the dough to rise. And you're like, oh, this takes too long. Let's make hamburgers, you know? And then you're like starving because you're like, oh my gosh, we haven't made anything. You just should have waited for the water to boil to put the noodles in. Like just give it a second. And like I said before, you can check in again, but I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with data because I think people check it way too much. You know what I mean? Like you post one reel and you're like, nobody liked it. Never mind. I'm not going to do reels. Like, you know, like let's give it months. Like let's give it 3 to 6 months. I know some people say only 3 months, but I still feel like in this weird world where there's so much information online, it takes a while to get that water boiling, you know? So just,
Yeah.
and if you're having fun, like it's easier to stick with it, like you were saying. So just keep sticking with it and definitely don't keep adding stuff because then you also are going crazy and you're not doing anything very well either. Like leaving and do them all. We just like spread ourselves so thin that we can't really do any of it good. And I guess that's really what I mean by less content, but better. because it's like something you can really focus on.
Mm, yeah, I love the sample of the pizza, noodles, and nuts. So, going back to the personal brand story, can you recall a specific moment when you realize of the impact that sharing that story has for your business and for your audience?
Yeah. Well, I just mentioned the time that I bought the course when my husband was in the hospital. So I have a audio course called Steal This Course. Well, it used to be called Steal This Course, but it's called Stop Buying Courses. In the beginning, I thought I was really funny because there's a book called Steal This Book, but I kept having to tell people, "Oh, Steal This Course is about to help you stop buying courses." And now it's just called Stop Buying Courses because my marketing was a little too clever for my own good back then. Um, and it's like a $9 course that you can steal, quote unquote, if you put in the coupon code Steal This Course. But we I talk a lot about my first exposure to online business and courses and how much money I spent on courses. And we also did a Zoom meeting, and we called it the Online Business Shame Show. And everybody had their cameras off, and we put in fake names so nobody like knew who we were. And people shared things that they had bought. And I also beeped out if they said anybody name, like whose course it was or whatever, which ended up sounding really funny because it would be like, I bought Beep's course. And like, because I don't want to like throw shade at anybody, but I wanted people to have a space to talk about like the mistakes that they've made or things they've fallen for. And people like carry that and feel like so stupid for falling for it, or can't believe I, inherited this money and then I wasted it all on this thing, or, people shared their stories. And so that's part of the audio course, that recording that we did in the Zoom room. And I feel like that was a time where I was like, I was embarrassed about the money I had spent. And, you're supposed to like build your authority in online business and kind of like act like you have it all together because otherwise no one's going to hire you unless you look like you know what you're doing. And so to make the decision to kind of be like, oh, I didn't really know what I was doing. And like, sometimes I still fall for it. Like, I mean, I've written emails recently that's like, oh my gosh, I bought, at least now they're not really expensive courses. It's like an Instagram ad that gets me. It's like a $27 course. And I buy it and I'm like, why did I do that? Yeah. So I think doing that course and having that meeting helped me see the power in sharing your own story and how it can like inspire others to share their stories and also connect with you on a deeper level, which it would be interesting now. I mean, their cameras were off, but a lot of them talked to me, via email and stuff. So I kind of know who was there. And since I don't really care about data, but it would be interesting if I knew how many people there have become clients of mine over the years, because I know that I can already think of like 3 or 4 of them that have worked with me because I feel like, and that's not why I did it. I wasn't like, oh, and then I'm going to like connect with them and they're going to hire me. But I just think once you're like connected with people and in your mind, they like you and they know you. And when I need to design a book cover or a podcast cover or whatever, I'm going to call Deanna because I love Deanna. She's my girl. But it's a long game, right? Like we're talking about
Yes. Yes.
like being patient. And even in some ways, like I said, I didn't even plan for it. So just showing up authentically, I think creates real relationships. But just like in your real life, you can't say like, well, I'm going to be friends with this person so that if my husband ever has surgery, they'll bring me dinner. Like that's not how it works. You just like make friends. And then when you need support or they need support, you're friends. And I do consider most of my clients and people in Content Playhouse my actual friends. People leave and they're like, well, now I can't box her anymore. And I'm like, well, maybe not all the time, but we're definitely still going to box her. What? Like, we're friends. Don't leave me. What are you talking about? So I think that has power for sure.
Mm, yeah. And one of the things that I like about your networking pop-up parties is how you bring these prompts that they are fun and creative. And then you have an opportunity to talk to people about business, but in a different context. It's like the type of question that make you actually have a conversation and really have a feeling of the other person, not just they are saying their sentence that they learn and they say again and again, and we all do. And it's more like that. It's even sometimes it's like about memories or about why we pick a special a special a specific fruit or whatever,
Mhm.
and it's so funny. Yeah, I think it's a super creative way of networking, but also I believe that it's really effective because you have a better understanding of the person of the brand.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you for saying that. I agree. They are really fun. Like and I was thinking the other day, someone asked me, "Well, how do you come up with the questions?" Because for the pop-up networking events, I have a co-host, and this is just my first year of doing them. So, I mean, half a year. So most of the people who've co-hosted are like people I've been friends with for a while in the online business space and or clients of mine or whatever, but I know them. And someone said, "Well, how do you come up with those questions?" And like, do they help you come up? Do they write them? Do you write them? And I'm like, "No, I write them." Because but again, the long game of like me just knowing them and saying like, I think one of them was that like one of the very first ones I did was my client Julie Brown, and I said, "Oh, Julie Brown was obsessed with wrestling, like WWE wrestling growing up. What like show or something fun were you obsessed with when you were little, and how does that maybe relate to what you do today?" But she wasn't like, "Will you make up a question about wrestling?" Like she was like, "Oh, hilarious. You're talking about how I loved wrestling." And I'm like, "Cause it's so funny." Um, but it was interesting because the person asking me, it felt like they were trying to do the thing, like systematize it and be like, how can I efficiently do questions that do, and I'm like, no, you have to like just know the person and it's kind of branching out to where it's some of my newer business friends, but I like going on their Instagram and kind of like finding little golden nuggets and being like, oh, okay, they have like a puppy. I'm going to talk about this or whatever. So it doesn't have to be like your best friend, but I think you're right. Connecting with people as humans first and then business owners. Because we always end up at those things talking about our businesses. I never leave a room thinking, oh, all we did was talk about, kid shows or songs or fruit. Like, I wonder what they do because it always like relates to their business because we're all so passionate about our businesses. It's hard not to talk about them if you're in a room with other business owners. So, yeah, I think that's fun.
Yeah. So when in the situation of sharing your story, have you faced any unexpected challenges?
I think the one thing that I don't share that much about, although the closer you get to me, the more I can't not talk about them, is my kids. Like when I first started my business, though, I followed some people who really made their kids a lot about their marketing and being like mompreneurs and being a mom and running a business. And again, I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what they're doing and they're successful. So I better talk more about my kids and would put them more on Instagram and just talk about them more. And then there wasn't anything like specific that happened, or I definitely don't judge other people who use their kids. Like, and I will sometimes, I consider my email list like a little closer subset. So sometimes I will talk about them. Um, but I did sort of make a conscious choice to be like, okay, you know what? Our family is going to be like our family. I talk about my husband, Matt, all the time, but, the kids, I was like, okay, we're going to like put this on the back burner. They're not going to be, they used to be on my about page and my website. Like it was much more part of my brand to talk about being a mom. Of course, I still talk about being a mom because it's like what I do all the time. It's like I'm the boring, typical mom, like driving a minivan with two kids. How can I not talk about them? And they're so darn cute, which it was hard at first not to show them off because like they're mine. And of course I love them. Um, but that was one time where I was like, made a conscious choice to be like, I am going to sort of figure out what, and I want people listening, like when we say authentic, it doesn't mean you have to like share everything about yourself, or share every struggle immediately or even ever if you don't want to. um, but that was the one thing that when we were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I like totally used to have my kids on my website, took them down. Because when I thought about it, I was like, they're really not part of my business, and it was just one of those things, one of those rules I was sort of following just because.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, just as you said, like personal is not the same as private. You can
Hmm.
keep things, you can you can keep your privacy and have a personal brand and show your personality, your values, and the experiences in your life that make who you are, but still you can keep your privacy and decide what to share and what not. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's making that conscious decision of, okay, this is my line. I am going to share this, but not this other thing. I felt that, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I know you help people with their content strategy. I would love to know your insight on how you help them in those decisions. Like if they sometime maybe in your community, they share about these concerns about what to share and not and what to keep private. Do you have these kind of conversations around content?
I'm trying to think. I don't think that we've talked. I don't think anybody's really struggled with like what to keep private or what not to, but I do know that we had one member who was sort of emulating a little bit, like doing sort of a happy hour, like a pop-up party kind of idea. Cause I was like, well, it's pretty fun. Like maybe if you think it would be fun. And she comes to them and I was like, try it and see what happens. And she was like having a lot of anxiety around like, are people going to show up or not show up? And so we kind of realized, okay, we got to like change the lever because this is not fun. This is not easy for you to promote because you have this like fear around, uh, so then we brainstormed and we are like, what's a way could you pre-record the interview with the guest? Like still kind of, we sort of like made her own version of a happy hour. And I thought that was a cool way because it's hard as the community leader, quote unquote, um, to not be like, oh my gosh, pop-up parties are working. Like I'm getting signups. People are coming. People like them. Like we can't all just do pop-up parties because I did them. But I do see like a lot of business owners selling things that like worked for them and just saying like
Mm.
repackaging it and saying, here's how you grow your email list. Just host a pop-up party. And then everyone does a pop-up party. So I, of course, don't care if anyone, like if you're listening and you're like, oh, these sound fun. Like I didn't invent networking gatherings. You know what I mean? So but it's interesting, and this is what I love about what I do, especially coming from a teacher background and making sure that people have one-on-one access to me, is being able for them to vox to me and say like, "Oh, okay, I've done 2, like, it's stressing me out," like a little, and I'm like, "Okay, let's brainstorm. How could we use this as a jumping off point?" But like we were talking about earlier, make it match your personality and make it feel fun for you. Because doing it exactly like I did does not feel fun for you. And also was not working for you. So let's figure it out so that we can see what can work for you. And I think being able to one-on-one box me about that kind of stuff. And I know there's coaches who you can submit a question before, or it's only group discussions, or maybe it's a podcast of people's Voxer questions and I answer them and everyone can listen. Like for me, I'm like, sometimes you just want to Voxer me. Like you don't want me to turn it into a teachable moment for everyone and be like, this person's struggling with this thing.
Mm.
Here's what you can do. And I also think sometimes we waste time. Like I would be nervous about the other members listening to that question if it has nothing to do with their business. Then they're sitting there not making progress in their business because they're just listening to me answer a question about someone else's business. So I think having the mix of community spaces where we can all, that's why I said I'm a quote unquote leader. I love everyone bringing ideas to the table, but also having that one-on-one space over Voxer to like, for me to answer your question and for it not to feel like it's more content for me to like share with everyone or something,
Mm, yeah, yeah, and it's because you always have ways of, let's say, create content from that. From that, if you feel like, okay, this is something that it could be interesting for others, then you go in the opposite direction and bring back to the community, just in the way that makes sense for you to explain to them, right?
Yeah. Well, and I've done that before too, because sometimes people will say, in the Voxer, like, well, how would I do that? Like one time I remember someone wanted to make little stickers like I do in Canva. So I just open up Canva on my computer and record a loom, and that goes into the big area. Cause I'm like, oh, hey, if anybody else wants to know, cause that doesn't feel as like vulnerable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting how it shakes out. But I do like that there's like very much a community side and very much like a one-on-one, this person. Like, I know people's kids' names, I know people's cats' names, like, and I think people are a little bit surprised because they've been in programs where they're just a person, like they're just a number.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it comes from my teaching background where I'm like, no. Because even when I taught elementary school, I mean, not that there's 500 people in Content Playhouse, but as the art teacher of an elementary school, I see every kid. You know what I mean? So it's a little rough for kindergarten because they're brand new. But after kindergarten, like I'm seeing these kids grow from kindergarten, first grade, second. So by the end, I mean, like I know 500 kids' names, and I just sometimes do feel like online business could be a little better about talking less about the revenue they're generating and how many spots they're filling, and like spending a little more time on like getting to know the people in their programs. Just saying.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely love that. Because it's, as you say, sometimes in some places you might feel like not even a person, it's just a number
Mhm.
in the list. And I was talking today to someone and we were talking about small lists and small email lists and how she has a few number and so on. It's like, okay, imagine all those people in your living room and
Yeah,
each of them they are a human being, and it's like it's not just a number or a name in your list, it's a person that decided to join.
yeah,
So we are so used to these big numbers and what is the goal that we need to reach out and all that, that sometimes we forget that each of those, even if you have a 30 person email list, each of those is a person that decided to, hey, I want to know more about you. And that's,
hmm,
if you think about them individually, it's much more than a number that
yeah,
might look like small at the beginning.
yeah. I agree so much, and I think also it takes the pressure off because we've
Mm.
been talking. This whole conversation is about, how quickly we can grow, and we're new and we don't know what we're doing, and like go, 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 go. We can't even wait for our water to boil to make our pasta. And so another thing I did in my business was really look at my personal finances for my family and for my business and how much do I need to make? Because I think in the beginning we're all like six figures, and now I feel like everybody's saying seven figures. I do not need to grow $1 million business to live my life and be happy. I maybe someone would say I have a money mindset issue because I'm not telling the universe I don't want $1 million. I'm saying on paper I do not need to grow a business to $1 million because that business will look very different than the business I grow if I want to grow, say, 250,000. If the top line, like all quote unquote, all I need to sell is 250, which I'm not there yet. But honestly, that is sort of, that's my like pie in the sky. Like if I sold $250 worth of stuff in 1 year, the Seymours would be sitting pretty with the bills we have, with the things we like to do. Like we're not trying to buy a lake house. We're not trying to take a private jet somewhere, rent a yacht anywhere. Like it's just not, we want to go camping, like we want a nice tent or we want to rent a cute cabin on Airbnb. Like we don't need $1 million. And when I figured that out, that also let me cut out content, have more joy because it was so much more attainable than feeling like, well, I got to keep up with these billionaires everywhere. And like they have teams, like we said, like you're not even playing that game. You don't want to do that. I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. I want to stay pretty much solo with my VA and like build a very profitable business. And when you start
Mm.
saying that, it's so much more realistic, and all the pressure of like having to be some crazy billionaire is like gone, and you can just like have more fun. And
Mm.
I was in a workshop one time, and we had to say our big hairy audacious goal, and I said 250. And I feel like the people were like, "No, no, you can do better than." I'm like, "No." Like I literally have a spreadsheet, and it would be super awesome if we had too many. Like I also have a spreadsheet of what we need now, and it's not 250. And there's a mid spreadsheet. Like if I sell, 150, oh, we're like feeling kind of rich already. Like if I made 250, we are good. And I think it's important not to keep moving that goalpost, and if I get to 250, am I going to want to get to 350? Am I going to want to get to 4? And what am I going to have to give up in my life to get
Mm.
there? Or how will my business change? Because it could be that I hire people and now I'm more of a manager and I don't really want to be a manager. I don't like being a manager. I like listening to music and making designs for people and coaching people on Voxer. So I don't want to have a big team that I'm managing, and to scale up, that's probably what it
Mm.
would have to look like. So I think that is important too. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree on that because it's like my big goal is not the number a
Hmm.
million.
Yeah.
My big goal is have the freedom that I want and travel all that I want and do my time as I want. So for doing that, which is the business model that I need? I don't
Hmm.
need a million business because that model will look totally different probably of what I want. I don't want to run a team. I want a micro team that help me, but that's it. I don't want to have 30 people to have all the months thinking about the person that I need to run this business to make everything works for them and for all the responsibility and all that. So, and for the people that like that, perfect,
Hmm.
perfect. Go for it, go for it. But it's
Yeah.
not my game. So
Hmm.
it's not that I am, in my opinion, it's not that I am not ambitious enough. It's that my ambition is not the same that that person is different one, and maybe it's like work as little as possible. And when I am with my clients, I am 100% with them, totally focused and enjoying the process of exploring their stories and finding the story connector with them and helping them to figure it out how to share their story in a more articulate way. And I love that. And I really enjoy, and I enjoy learning about other people's stories. That's why I run also this podcast. But that doesn't mean that my goal needs to be a specific number that someone else dream is dictating.
Yeah. I think it's exactly what we were saying before. Like, it's based on your personality. Like,
Yes.
if you want to be like a CEO, and maybe you even had a job before where you were in charge of a team and that felt good for you and you love that and you want to work your way back up to that within your business, like, go for it. It's just like knowing yourself. And I think, just to bring it back to the beginning, but that's what happens when we come into online business and take too many courses and do too many downloads. We like lose sight of our own voice and our own preferences and our own choices. And yes, I'm with you 100%. Like, I'd rather have the freedom. Like, I want to go get that Airbnb or go camping. So I want to have a week off. And I don't want to worry about making sure my team is going to get paid because I have to like make so much money. Um, so yeah, figuring out what matters to you.
Yeah.
Because also, and right now too, with my kids being little, like being present with my kids. I mean, I'm like, pretty soon they're going to be like teenagers before I know it, and they're not going to want to hang out with me. And then I can maybe work more, and maybe that's
Yes.
when I'll get to 250. Like, it also doesn't have to be tomorrow. I've met with people or joined courses, and they're like, oh, I could get you there by the end of the month or the end of the year. And I'm like, no, that sounds stressful. I don't need to get there by the end of the year. Like, we are fine. We're just going. It's like slow and steady. That's the pace I want. That's
Mm,
the pace I like. It feels good to me.
yeah.
So,
And you choose your rhythm, right? There is
yeah.
not a right or wrong. You find your way to run your business. You find your rhythm to how in this season makes sense to go in that path. And maybe in the next
Yeah.
one I am like fast, fast, fast because I want to do whatever it
Hmm.
is. And it's
Yeah.
okay
The
to change my
levers.
mind.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And nothing is set in stone. So I am saying this, and tomorrow I say the another thing because I evolve, and it's okay. It's
Yep.
okay. We can change.
Yeah. And we're in charge. Like, we're the boss. So
Yes.
we can do whatever we want.
Yes.
It's pretty magical.
Yeah. So you know that the name of the podcast is Who Cares About My Story? So what would you say to someone that is wondering that?
Hmm. I would say, honestly, like, you don't know who's going to care about your story until you start showing up and sharing your story and those people come forward. Because, like I was saying with the stop buying courses, I didn't know. I kind of was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, to say I like bought a course without my partner knowing when he was in the hospital, like, that sounds really bad to me. Like looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Thank you to Matt for not being super duper mad at me. Although he's more like disappointed, which is kind of harsh too. You're like, oh, that's worse. If he had just gotten mad at me, it would have been better maybe. But um, and then when I shared that story, I couldn't, I was surprised by like, oh, the reaction. So I think if you're feeling like who cares, the only way to find out is to tell your story. And I also think there's a misconception that your story has to be really, really interesting. And I would say that kind of the more like boring, quote unquote, boring it is, the more relatable it is. And so sometimes I've written emails about just the silliest thing. And I guess this is a time when I did bring up my kids. I wrote an email about my son sticking a bead up his nose and how I had to go not the ER. We went to like the urgent care to get it removed. And I got so many replies from that. And I was just being like, oh my gosh, my kid stuck a bead up his nose. And it was an email about knowing when to outsource because my husband was going to try to get it out himself. And it was like kind of scaring me. So I was like, no, we're taking him to the professional. Um, and I didn't really think that much of it. And then when everybody replied and was like, oh my gosh, my kid stuck this up his nose or whatever, I was like, it's one of my favorite emails because I was like, oh my gosh, who knew? But it was just something that happened that I was like, what am I going to write my email about? Like, well, this is a funny story. So I think if you're feeling like who's going to care, just toss it out there and see. And not everybody cares about every one of my stories. But the more you do it, the more people are going to relate to you, I think.
Mm. Yeah, and one of the things that I always repeat is like, you don't need an epic story.
Mm-mm.
Your story is relevant and it's worth telling, and your audience will care. And if it's about the personal brand stories, you choose moments of your story that will highlight the benefits of working with you, the skills that you have, your values, and how are you as a person, so they can connect with that human being. So it doesn't need to be an epic story. You don't need this outstanding narrative. It's about maybe those moments, what were the lessons that you get from that experiences, and what were the emotions that you live, and all that stuff, which is more important than the specific details of the story itself. So yeah, and how to use your story in a way that you create unique content, because yeah, there are more people offering similar services, but your stories are unique because it's like based on, and you are telling them based on who you are. So you are
Mhm.
going to tell them in a way that is unique because you
Yeah.
are the one telling them.
Yeah. I think if someone tells a story that's like too impressive, I feel like disconnect. Like I'm almost like, oh, okay, well, you're like super fancy. Or like, I feel like if you get a story that's like too over the top, then you're like, oh, people can't relate, right? Then I'm like, oh, she's real fancy or her house is real fancy or, but there's also like, just because I can't relate to it, there could be a bunch of other people who could relate to it. So yeah, you just never know. I love what you do and how you help people like weave that in. Cause I think a lot of people also say, oh, tell stories to sell. And people who it doesn't come naturally to are like, how? What are you talking about? Like, how do I do that? So I think what you're doing is super awesome.
Thank you. So before we wrap up, let's go with a question that I like to ask to all my guests. So, what part of your personal brand story surprises people the most?
Hmm. Um, what part of my story surprises people the most? I do think I think it's still good. I know I keep talking about it. People are like, oh my gosh, stop buying courses. But I think knowing like where I am now when people find out how much of a rule follower I was before and how much money
Mm,
I spent having other people tell me how to do things. Like I think they think I just hopped on the scene and was this rebel who like does what I want but that's not how it happened at all. It was a lot of money and a lot of time wasted trying to do things by the book, by the rules before I threw it all out the window. And so I think if people see somebody like me, maybe with too many colors, or feels like, gosh, like I go to her website and she's just like, how does she do it? Like she's just all there. Like that is the millionth rewrite of my website. That is, I mean, the first version of my website had like a stock photo, probably from Canva or something, of like someone typing on a computer with like hot pink nail polish. Like I do like pink. Pink is my color. But my nails have never looked like that. Like I've never been like, they're always chipped if I ever have them painted. Like I bite them, like that's not artist fingernails at all. And it was not me at all. So if you go to my website and think, gosh, how is she doing all that? It takes time, and like you can do it. And the cool thing I think about me and Content Playhouse is also that I am an art teacher. And so there's lots of people too who think, well, I'm not creative like her, or like they just have this story that they're telling themselves that they are not creative. And a lot of times people think creative means artistic, or I can draw, or I can paint, or I can do whatever. But I disagree. I always had high school students especially say, I don't even know why they put me in here. I can't draw. Why am I in art? I can't draw. I don't even know why they put me in here. And I would say to them, like, well, if they put you in Spanish 1, you wouldn't be saying, I don't even know why I'm in here. I can't speak Spanish. The whole point of signing up for Spanish class is to learn Spanish. And so I feel like having business owners understand, like, you're in here to learn how to be more creative and sort of practice that and flex that muscle. And coming from my art teacher background, it's just funny how it's come full circle. And I feel like I'm almost an art teacher again, but in a way that feels really good to me and not within the system that I kind of hated. So yeah, people thinking, oh, I'm not creative, so I shouldn't join Content Playhouse. I'm like, that's what we do. Like the other day,
Yeah.
someone said, I always used to have to use a template for my emails, and now I just have like so many ideas. And I'm like, yes, that is because you're like practicing that muscle of like, I don't need the template. Like she's like reconnecting to her own ideas and stories, and it's exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like it's allowing yourself to experiment. And that, as you say, circle back with when you were an art teacher, and I'm sure kids, younger age, they are totally okay with whatever they try. They are curious. So going back to that creativity moment where
Yeah.
we allow ourselves to do whatever.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up because the little kids don't care. Like they'll just go for it. But I taught mostly in high school, and they are
Okay. Ooh.
very nervous to look dumb or make a mistake, or like scared to try because what if people laugh at me? And so helping them figure out, like we're saying, how to navigate through it. And like my art assignments were never super. I mean, I'm sure you can't imagine me making a very strict art assignment where you have to follow all the rules. So like, how can we make it work to where, you feel like you're expressing yourself and you feel comfortable showing up in a way that works for you?
Amazing, because now it's like really aligned, like your past students, high school, afraid to fail, afraid to showing up and being judged, and then your business owners, then they are in the same way for content creation, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for this conversation. Has been a pleasure. Please tell us how to connect with you and learn more about all the amazing things that you have.
Yeah. Okay. So I would just say go to my website, which is deannaseymour.com. And if you click on, I think it's called resources, but I have a spot called essays, and those are some of my older emails. But I'm pretty sure the beat up the nose one is right pinned at the top because that is one of my favorites. But you can kind of see what my emails are like, and then if you like them, dive in, because then you'll know when all the pop-up networking party stuff is happening. And I share lots of links from different people on my list, and I think it's a fun little resource. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation, for all the insights and all the ideas. And I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of our listeners.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. If you found this episode valuable, consider subscribing or leaving a review. Your feedback means a lot. Did something resonate with you today? Please share your thoughts on the podcast platform or on your socials. I would love to hear from you and give you a shout out. Just tag me on Instagram at Reme Mancera. I can't wait for you to meet our next guest. Until then, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling.